So here we are, a day early, because obviously it's Halloween tomorrow, and my doorbell would have been going off left, right, and centre all night long because the kids around here dress up, which is all good fun for me because I love a bit of that. And also, I'm actually at an event. House builder awards event tomorrow at the O2, so I wouldn't be around anyway. Now, tonight's guest is a very interesting. I first met Sarah at Flux. We've done a couple of fluxes together. Always have a chat, and I think you're really going to enjoy what she's coming on for. It's different. It is different, and this is the one thing that I really like about this series that I'm putting together. Is I'm trying to get different people on each week now, so that it brings a different feeling to this broadcast. So next week, I've got a photographic artist, which is right up my street, which is Minnie Mäkinen from Sweden. She's really interesting how she deals with her art. I will be posting something on the usual places about that when it comes up. And then the following week, something absolutely completely different, which is I've got a performing artist, which is Scarlet Butterfly. And she, to be fair, she features in a lot of my work, but I really want you to see what she actually does. She's a performing artist. She works with fire and lyra poles and burlesque and stuff like that, but this is her art. So this show is not just about art as people perhaps think of it. It's also a lot about the different types of art there is in the world. And then, of course, the other thing I'm really trying to do is get an art critic on, and so we can have a chat with him. And the questions that night might be a bit interesting, but we'll see how that goes. So let's jump in now to this week's guest, Sarah Levin. So as usual, got a little bit of a video to put together, and this is her work. So there you go. And if you were watching last week, you know I have a bit of a thing, bit of an affinity with purple, and purple certainly jumped out from one of those images. And so let's get Sarah in and start what is going to be a really interesting chat. And I spoke to you earlier, Sarah. I'm just going to swap you over to the other side like that. And hello.
Hello, great to see you.
Funny that I chose a bit of piano music because you've got a piano in the background there, and I can bring that up so people can see that. Yep. And your fabulous art all around the room. That's what we like to see as well.
Thank you.
Now, before we kick off, the piano is very relevant, isn't it? Because people might not know this, but you started life out as a musician. So how did that? And where did that sort of, first of all, where did that talent come from? Does that come down through your family? And secondly, what was it that sort of pushed you in that direction?
Well, I'm not sure it directly came down through the family, although my dad was good at whistling and could sing in tune, but neither parents are particularly musical. I think I had the good fortune to be at school in the 60s and 70s, when music was very important, or was taught a lot, and a great importance put on it. And I think the exposure that I had ignited an interest in various instruments, recorder to start with, as so many children did. And it's such a brilliant starter instrument. Don't get me on my hobby horse about that, because I think it teaches you far more than the kind of the tinny sound people associate with it. It's a really great instrument. And then, of course, people of our generation will remember the Singing Together programs on the radio. You used to have a pamphlet and you'd sit in class and you'd sing along to the BBC education recording. And those sorts of things just ignite these little sparks and a passion to try something. And senior school was that opportunity for me when I started secondary school. I took up the piano and the French horn, and I did a masses of singing. We had a fabulous choir mistress who was quite innovative, very, very talented. I was fortunate that she taught me singing and piano, and she also took the school choir to the BBC to record the Singing Together programs that I'd experienced at primary school. So we had wonderful outings to Broadcasting House in Great Portland Street. And also we used to go and compete in the Eisteddfod and sing in concerts at the Albert Hall. So that was all my introduction. And then I decided I wanted to go on and study music. So I went to Trinity College of Music. I studied French horn, piano and singing. And French horn was my first study.
So just let me stop you on the French horn there for a minute.
Yes?
Well, I know you're quite petite. How the hell did you manage with the French horn? It's not exactly, a little cornet or something. So
no,
it's
quite weighty. I don't know. I really like the sound of the French horn, and I think that if you really have a passion for something, you're prepared for, for the difficulties that brings. And I think for me, that taking it to and from college every day on the train was probably the hardest bit, and playing it was really enjoyable. And being involved in an orchestra or a choir or anything like that is just such a it's a unique experience. And when everything comes together, and you're part of that big performance with hundreds of people all performing the same work, there's no other feeling like it. It's just incredible.
So would you say that when you do something like Flux, it's a similar kind of feeling, because you've got all those artists there, you're all in the same sort of moment, especially on the PV night. What I'm trying to get at is, you mentioned just then in particular, if you've got passion for something, you're much more likely to keep going and look, I really want to do that, which is, you've gone from music. I think you said when we were having a chat earlier, you taught piano for a long time.
Yes.
And now you're into this big art world that you've leapt into, and your work is really quite different to other people's. So I think that's something that's really stands out for me, because you've gone down this sort of botanical garden route.
Yes.
Okay, so the first question that comes to mind about that is why? Why that? Well, why botanical gardens? Why not landscapes? Why not, other abstracts? Why specifically this?
My journey into art is was quite a surprise to me. It sort of came up and hit me on the nose unexpectedly. And I think that's really, I've always loved gardening. I've always loved flowers. And I had never really been interested in art up until the point that it's my son. He had a competition. He'll hate me for saying this, but he had a competition at school, which was to create a postcard over the summer holidays. And like me, he didn't really like art at school, and I think it was very prescriptive back in my day. It was very prescriptive, and it was all about perspective, and there was no sort of freestyling. Acrylic paints weren't even in the school, so you know they're a fairly modern invention. In the 1940s, acrylic paint came into being. I googled art without brushes. So my work is completely without brushes.
Is it?
And I came across this wonderful acrylic paint pouring. Now, paint pouring or fluid art can conjure up lots of different things. There are lots of different types of fluid paints, but this is actually where you mix paint to a consistency that you want to use it, that works for your artwork. As you can see on that slide, that's quite a mix, and it's quite thick. And so coming into I actually got hooked because of these acrylic paints. You could see when you had them mixed in there with their pouring medium, and you poured them on top of each other in a cup, the colours, the layers stayed the same. They didn't blend and they didn't mix. Not like, you know, watercolours where you kind of dip your brush in and all the water goes sort of muddy. And I think that's what really captivated my my imagination, I suppose. And I wanted to get to know a little bit more about the paint. And so I followed lots of YouTubers. There are some fabulous artists out there. And of course, I fell into this in lockdown. So I was looking, you know, on YouTube, watching so many different artists and getting lots of ideas. And there were these great big Dutch pours, they call them, where you blow the paint out with a hairdryer or this, that, and the other. And I thought, well, so many people are doing this. I would like to do something a little bit different. And it just happened quite by chance that lockdown brought that time to experiment. I didn't have the school run. You know, I couldn't teach my students because they couldn't come to the home, and Zoom lessons weren't, you know, appropriate for all of them. So I was really, really lucky that I was ordering in all these paint supplies, which were coming daily almost, and canvases of all shapes and sizes. And I had the time to experiment, and these floor kind of evolved, and I ran with it. One of the paintings that you showed earlier on, Gary, which was the cream one, I think it was one of the first, the square one with the kind of the more wild flowers.
Is that this one?
Yeah, this one. That was one of my first paintings in this style. And it was from that, I learned a lot from that painting. I made so many mistakes and corrections, but I realized that I wanted to have actually an outline to the flower as well as the flower. So each flower is made up of each segment of each flower is made up of 3 drops of paint placed in a particular way or flooded in a particular way to create an outline, the color of the flower, and then the sort of the little petals on the top of each piece. And so it's quite a process.
Well, so what I think is impressive, looking at that first one you did, you have actually got quite a bit of depth in that, which is quite staggering when by the way that you actually create the picture. Look, I've seen you at Flux. We've had a big old chat, talked about all sorts of stuff. I've never actually said to you, how do you do that? And that, which is good for me tonight, because wow, that's quite amazing. No brushes, and you use it the way that you use it is quite something. It reminds me a little bit of I cannot remember the name, but years ago I used to have a workshop in a place called 401.5 in the Wandsworth Road, and it was full of people all on art council grants and all the rest of it. And there were a couple of women who did it's got a name which totally escapes me, but they would do all the outlines in hot wax and then drop the colors in. So it almost looks quite similar to the way you've got the lines round your colours. You know, very similar. And then, of course, when they washed it, the wax came out, and you got left with all the material that then they would make stuff out of it. But yeah, it's got a particular name, that. But yeah, quite remarkable. So look, another question I ask every week, which is what determines your color palette for a particular picture?
A new tube of paint, maybe. It might you know, it might be as simple as that. So I might think, okay, I wonder what a background would look like in that color. So ultramarine blue was a bit of an experiment for me, but it's one that's taken me a long way. These behind me are ultramarine blue, and they've sort of got a lovely electric feel to them. And then the fluorescent, this one here particularly is fluorescent paint. All the flowers are fluorescent, and they really pop against that blue background. And I feel that works really well.
So you've got a torch there, and I know it's not that easy to see, but just give us a little bit of flavour for that. When you shining the torch on, you can see that they are. You can actually see they're fluorescent, which is something even else. So that must mean as well. That must mean that you are. Do you, when someone buys something like that picture, are you then talking to them about where they hang it, the light that might need to be on it? Do you go through all of that, or do you just say, look, it's fluorescent, you need to think carefully about where you put it, but leave it up to them pretty much?
Yeah, and also fluorescent paints don't have the same light fastness as some of the other other paints. So you do have to be careful about not hanging them in like sunlight and that sort of thing.
No. I wasn't thinking that. I was thinking more of like a picture light more than anything.
Yes, well, I think so, and I suppose really, I mean, not many people have the UV lights anyway. So if it was in a nightclub with a glitter ball, it might look, you know, you might think you've had one too many.
So if there's any nightclubs out there that are watching, we need to get your art in them quite clearly. People might look at that and wonder what the hell they've been drinking, mind you.
Exactly.
It's quite interesting because I can see we've got another one here. And I can see this actually, I don't know if it's this one or it's behind you anyway, I think. It's not pantomime season yet. It's no, this one. Which again is different again, because you've got a real it almost looks like you're the pictures that people do, photographers do, where they're laying on the floor and they take it right up through the forest to the sky. It's that vibe, isn't it? That's what's coming from that to me.
Exactly. You've hit the nail on the head, exactly. And that's what I was going for with that, looking up through flowers to the sky. In fact, the one behind me is a smaller one. This one is probably 3 times the size of
is it?
Yeah, this one's a new one that I've done with fluorescent paints.
Right.
Been experimenting fluorescent.
So again, you got to do you plan these out, or are you just right, let's go, I know what I'm going to do, and off you run?
I can honestly say it's about 50-50 because they're all of a similar style. I know sort of what I'm going to be doing. This one was more tricky, I think, the hexagon, because it went all the way around the edge of the canvas and it was trying to keep the center even. So if I just explain a little bit of my process, that might be helpful, because I use heavy body paints and I mix them with something called floral, which is a latex paint extender, which gives the paints their fluidity. So once all the different colors are mixed up, then I have my canvas flat on the table and I flood it with the main color, either the sort of the sky area or the center, as in with the hexagon. And I tilt off as much of the paint as I possibly can. And then I will do the grasses around the edge or underneath these flowers. And that's what I use one of these for, ball chain, which is, you can find on the kitchen sink. This is my trusty ball chain. Okay, so you probably could use an art tool, but I like this. And you drag it through all the different green grass colors, and it brings up wonderful stripy grasses. It picks up a lot of the colors, so it makes the grasses interesting, but the sort of flow up behind.
Wow.
And then on top of that, and this is all done while it's wet, the whole process you have to complete while it's wet, is then placement of the flowers, and each one, as I say, each segment of each flower has 3 droplets of paint, all placed in a particular
So
way.
you're doing the picture from start to finish while it's wet.
I have
So
to, yeah, because it needs it needs, when you put the drops of the drops of paint on the grass, the wet paint that's underneath helps the petals to sort of flow out in a more organic way, and it shapes it, and you just can't do it when it's dry. So that's why I included, when you asked me for some photos, I included the one of the skewer going through the paint, because that's my other trusty tool. And you
you
can
carry on
see
talking. I'll
there,
find that one.
yeah, it's the one of the green background ones.
Okay. Yeah. Carry on.
Yeah, and
Because that's
you can actually see on that slide that the paint is really quite thick, because it's rising up on the skewer as it's drawn through the center of each droplet of paint to create that unique flower shape.
no, it's not going to come
So
up. I'll find that. I'll find that in a bit. So that, yeah, okay. Well,
yeah,
that, I mean, just jumping down to this one, for example,
yep.
just gives a bit of an idea of. Obviously, you've got other talented members in the family who paint as well.
Yeah, my lovely toy poodle. Yeah, sadly he's no longer with me, but he's
Oh, that's a
always been
shame.
a great support. He was always a great supporter.
Mm. So
And that was my,
so
sorry.
it also, yeah, it also looks as though you have actually got a bit of a dedicated sort of studio,
I
which,
have, yes. I had
yeah,
that built last year, and I'm really so grateful to have it. It's at the end of my mum's garden where I live, and I can sort of toddle off just down the garden path and have a potter, which is really, really lovely.
yeah.
Um,
Well, that's kind of what I was going to say. Really, if these pictures have to be done in one hit,
mhm.
you got to have a long uninterrupted time, haven't you, to put them
Yeah.
together? I mean,
You do, and you also have to make sure that you've got all your paints mixed up and ready to go. I mean, some of my earlier paintings probably have about 40 colours in them,
wow,
and it's not always apparent how many are in it. It depends where there's more interest in the sky, and there are more sort of obvious grasses. There are lots of colours that are laid down underneath the flowers. So it's, yeah, it takes a lot of paint. It's paint heavy.
yeah,
But the thing I really like about this process is that when it's finished, there are absolutely no brush marks. It's completely smooth, and I
yeah.
won't even use a palette knife on the sky colors, because any sort of indentation, even when the paint is wet, can make a variation in these in the density of the color, so you could see it sometimes depending on what
So
color.
are you then saying that you'll take the blue in that one that's behind you, for example?
Yeah,
Are you saying that you pour that out and then you're moving the canvas around to make it spread?
yeah, yeah.
Ah, dear oh Lord, that's quite amazing. Yeah, it's quite amazing. So, all right, leads me to another question: is what
Okay.
would you say? What's the longest time a picture has taken you then of solid working?
Oh, that's a good one. I'm not really of solid working.
Well,
or maybe
you
4.5 hours in just in the
well,
painting, but
yeah.
obviously mixing up the
Oh no,
paints
I'm not. Yeah,
probably takes like, way longer.
yeah. No, I meant literally
Yeah,
actually painting. Yeah,
I
because
think,
because it has to be wet. That's why I say
yeah.
that. Yeah.
I mean, I've got quicker as I've gone along, but I think, it's quite. If I had £1 for every flower I've painted, I'd be very rich.
Well, yeah, but also people think that to me, it's completely immaterial how long something takes you. It's more about the fact that, look, you've come up with this idea, you've mastered this technique. It doesn't make any difference. Actually, it's a beautiful. The end result is a beautiful piece of work that deserves to be on someone's wall. And I think that's looking at all the ones that you've got behind you, and we've got a few more so to have a look at. And I mentioned in the intro that there's a thing with me and purple, and I spoke to Paul Squire about it last week.
I heard.
And here we go. Another week where we've got a bit of purple on the go.
I know.
But you see, so one thing that we've not spoken at all about actually is how do you then put a title to your work? How do you actually say, all right, this is going to be called such and such?
I know. I do struggle with that. I'm sure I'm not the only one that struggles with titles. It's I don't know. And then something clicks and you feel that it works for that particular piece. So this one is Into the Light, because I felt that it was, you were looking through it and there was a golden sort of yellowy glow of the sun possibly, and it was leading you somewhere. So that one, that sort of came quite easily. But this is a slightly different style I was experimenting with. And as you can see, the background in this, the sort of sky areas, it's a mixture of more translucent paints, so that transparent paints, I mean, so that you see the layers and the depth in there a little bit more.
Yeah, so there's this one as well. So and again, this not as colourful as the previous ones, but then that's because you've got that quite imposing sort of background to it. It's and dare I say it, there's an element of sort of darkness about this one. There's a bit, and I love a bit of darkness, but it's got that sort of,
isn't it?
Sorry?
It's a bit threatening, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a bit threatening, and also you kind of want to go, hold on, what's up in that top left-hand corner? What is it where's that leading? What is this? What is this path that you're as the artist, you're drawing us towards? What's the story behind it? And it's kind of one of those things that I have a thing about people at exhibitions, the artists making sure that they talk to the people who are coming to the exhibition and potentially going to be buying their work. So I have a real big thing about, look, come on, make sure that you talk to people. And these are the sorts of things I can't believe that all the times that we've spoken, I've never once said to you, oh, how'd you do that? Because I normally do. I never for 1 minute thought, I didn't realise at all there was no brushes involved.
No.
Quite staggering. There's look, this gives you an example of just how much of your work you have at an exhibition. This is Flux at Christmas, I think, last year.
It was, that was my first ever Flux. It was great.
Yeah, I recognised the staircase at the back there, and so yes, looking at these, you can see. I mean, these two on the left, for example, those panels, I think are a metre across, a bit more than a metre across, actually.
They are.
So that they are big pictures. So that. Here we go. We've got another question, because I would say what determines
Mhm.
size? What determines the size that you're going to do?
Well, that's really interesting because when I first started, and I just felt, you know, I must paint a large painting and see how far I can push it. I think I am limited in either my arm length for reaching across some wet paint. You know, obviously in a canvas, I can't sort of, you know, wait till it dries and then move into it. So because it's flat, there's that limit of size. And also the weight of the paint on the canvas can cause the canvas to sort of dip. So there are I've found there are limitations on size. So the one that you referred to, this one here behind me, and the one in the two in the gold frame, they're the same size, and that they are actually the largest that I have done. And I would like to try and go a little bit bigger maybe, but I've kind of found a bit of a fascination in working quite small at the moment, and it's just really interesting. Some things work and some things don't, but what I really want to do is work out, and I'm working on this at the moment, is to paint in the center of the canvas and have something, you know, rather than being at the bottom being a garden. I'd rather like to have a, you know, or a vase or something. The trouble with that is because you're constantly adding paint, wet paint, it gradually shifts. So when it's at the bottom of the canvas, it's not so bad, because if it runs off the end, that's fine. I don't mind it. It looks like the flowers are organically growing up the canvas. So I'm working full focus at the moment, and we'll see. Maybe I'll have something to show you soon.
So do you prepare your canvas beforehand? What do you do to prepare it ready to take the paint? Because I'm talking to Michelle Watson, one of my earlier interviews. She paints straight onto the canvas. There's no preparation. She loves that look. But I'm guessing you have to be a bit careful, don't you? Because obviously any brush marks and whatever you're preparing to cancel is effectively could come through into your work, which is brush free. So what's your preparation of a canvas?
There isn't any. But what I do is buy pre-primed canvases, but they are a really good quality, because if you buy the cheap ones, they dip and they distort. So they do have to be really good, and you have to check that they're level, because if they're not, the paint will sort of go like that as it's drying.
Yes.
Of
course. That's something obviously you've got to think about. I mean, especially if you're doing all these flat, the last thing you want is for everything to end up on the left-hand side.
Exactly.
So with that amount of paint on each one, are they reasonably heavy as well then?
I don't think they're any heavier than anything else, but you have to allow them drying time. So I've only got one table to work on. So if I've done a big painting, I probably can't really move it for maybe 2.5, 3 days.
Right. So that also,
really
that's interesting, because you kind of have to factor that in as well, don't you? Because again, other people that I've interviewed, one of the questions is how many paintings you have on the go at any one time, and you've just answered that question before I've even asked it, which is that kind of makes sense as well. But if you were doing smaller paintings, then obviously you could have a couple on the go, like the oranges you've got behind you, for instance. You could have a couple of those, especially if they're a set, or you were doing say a triptych or something, you were using similar colors.
I have done that, and I think I've done 3 on the go. That's my sort of maximum, really. But of course, even though a painting might be dry, sometimes I do add to it. So on this one particularly, you can see there are also these dots rising up. So they're added afterwards. So when the painting is dry, it's I can't do that bit while they're wet. But not all my paintings have the little sort of closed bud elements to it.
Right, just think. I don't know if this. Yeah, no, that one's not. But again, this one's another different take. This one's still got that. Again, a bit of a foreboding background there that you can see all sorts into this. And I think what's really, really clever, in particular with this one, is how you've managed to create that. To me, a huge depth in the painting and that's primarily, I think, as a photographer, I would be looking at that and thinking, okay, I've got all sorts going on in the background. It could be a valley full of fog with mountains in the background. You've got your flowers right in the forefront, which are beautifully sharp and crystal clear, which leads you to that depth of that you've got in the background. So it's really a really clever way of creating depth within a picture.
And also the other thing that I've done in some of these with the more in-depth clouds or whatever, I add pearl paint, a pearl medium to my paints for the flowers, and so they have more of a shimmery effect. And so it's a bit like the moon. To me, it was the moonlight sort of shimmering on the flowers, and it doesn't show up, it doesn't pick it up in a photograph, but in real life it's quite apparent that the flowers are sort of got that lovely pearlescence about them.
Yeah. It's quite fascinating, really, how you can, presumably all of this stuff is completely out of your head.
Yes. I don't know what that says about my head.
Well, I know most people when I do any form of talk actually think I am completely out of my head, but it's amazing how it's out of your head, and you just I'm not being funny when I say this, but you're going with the flow, and you are literally, because the flow of the paint needs to work. Have you tried this technique in creating things that are not botanical?
No, I haven't. I'm not sure I could do that. No, I haven't. It might be something in the future. I mean, the thing is, it's having that time to experiment, and life is always so busy, isn't it? That's why, I kind of keep going with what I know, but I am experimenting a bit as I go along. And, sometimes something surprising happens. I didn't think that, if you'd asked me 5 years ago, you'll be an artist, or told me you'd be an artist, you'd have had a solo exhibition, you'd have exhibited at Marylebone with Flux and, Piccadilly with Flux, I would have laughed. I wouldn't, I would never in a million years have thought I would have become involved in art. I'm absolutely hooked. I'm absolutely delighted, because at 60, it's nice to have something new to focus on. It's exhilarating. It brings you new sort of joy and new life, doesn't it? To have something.
It does. I mean, I had a different path. I mean, I went to a school where you had to make choices, and I wasn't allowed to do art. So I used to go to a different college at night to do art, and I was doing pen and ink drawing, and which is great for me now that I use a tablet and a pen for my work. But isn't it funny how as you get older, I don't know whether it's a weird thing, but you get more involved in the art that you're producing than you perhaps would do when you were younger. And that's not to not throwing any problems or disparagement against anybody out there who is young, who is an artist, and certainly my artist next week is a young artist. But I think that you kind of, when we're younger, everything is like, oh God, I've got to do this. Next week I'm doing that. I want to go to a nightclub. I want to go out with my friends. I want to do all this. When you get older, you can sit there for 8 hours doing a picture and, making changes and getting things done. But I'm fortunate that I can make changes. You're going to struggle. You've got to actually, you can't, no, which is again is absolutely remarkable in itself, that you can't make changes. You've got to, it's got to, and wow. And it's a testament to, I'll tell you what, it's a testament to how good you are, that that there's no, you can't make mistakes because you can't do anything about them. And so,
well, no, not really. I mean, there are some things you can sort of go over and sort of work through if it's not too serious a mistake. But
well, I know, but
if it dries wonky, or it slips a bit because the temperature's changed, you know, those sorts of things you can't do anything about it.
No, but that's,
you know,
that's just experience in actually creating the work, isn't it? What I mean by that is there's a real symmetry to a lot of what you do. Let's bring that, bring this one back up, for example. I mean, you look at the way that you create your flowers. There's a proper symmetry to them. That if you weren't good, they would look wrong. So that's sort of what I'm getting at, is you can't. You've obviously got a workflow that you use, that you go through every time.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the same of most artists. You know, you obviously have a way of working that, you know, that works for you and for your style of photography, and I have a way that I fall back on, or that I visualize something. I mean, I don't know, when I start painting, sometimes I can end up using completely different colors from what I thought I was going to do, and then I think, oh, I'll have to try that next time, you know. So but it's, in a way, there is a formula to what I'm doing, you know. You know, it's always the flowers. I'm obsessed with flowers.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. I can see there's a formula, but I think probably you must have an inbuilt sense of color. You must do, which is surprising that you didn't come to art a lot earlier, because you've clearly got that inbuilt eye. And this is one of the things that when I am actually and doing a few talks that I do, one of the things that I say is that photographers in particular, you do have an inbuilt eye. So if you go through a magazine, you pull out all the pictures that you like, you write around them what it is you love about those, put those into piles, and then you'll see that you might have piles of that say you like black and white landscapes, right? And that means your eye is tuned to it. So that's what you go and concentrate on, because you're halfway there. And here, for me, it's a similar thing in the way that you're, because you have to work really, and I might be wrong, of course, and often am, but because you work in such a, you have to do it all in one go. You're not standing back, having a little look, thinking, what color shall I do? It's almost got to be in you that you automatically know what your color palette's going to be, and that could be generated by the background color that you choose.
And that is often the case, that it's generated by the background colors that I choose. The form, there are some things that I do that I repeat certain colors a certain number of times in the flowers. Sometimes I'm not sure whether this is a particularly good example behind me. No, it's probably not quite. But so this dark orange I've got in here 3 times here. Three times, and this is a lighter orange. And I'll make sure that they're not on the same level, so that they're rising or they're falling. So there is a bit of there's something going on in there.
So
that the eye isn't drawn to a line. Um, yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah,
So
I don't know.
so when you take the big one that's behind you now.
Yeah,
Once it's all dried and done and finished, is it coated
yeah.
with anything on top of that, or is it that's it?
Well, this one isn't. It's just the acrylic paint, and I liked the effect just of the paint on that one. Some of my more recent ones are I've been experimenting with glitter because I found that was quite exciting to put that into the main colour of the flower. And it's so interesting that it doesn't spread out of that colour. You mix it in, and I thought it would just sort of flow and spread everywhere, but it doesn't. It stays put, and so that's been quite an interesting experiment. And so those ones I've actually either varnished or put some sort of a resin-like finish on it because I wanted it to enhance the effect.
It just thinking about how we spoke earlier on about how you start your image off with all the background that you're putting on in the first place. And I didn't ask this at the time, so I'm going to ask now, and forgive me if you did actually say so, but do you, that first base color, like the blue that you've got there, do you have to let that dry before you then start putting on all your, or is that has to be wet as well?
Yeah. And that can take, and that can take me quite a long time to get, because I like that to be really quite thin, and it's got to be very, very even to give this wonderful sort of sheen, and just sort of, I don't know, it's almost like just to give you an example, I mostly paint on canvases, but I do also occasionally paint on something called Yupo paper, which is very light photographic paper.
Right.
And it's water resistant. So with the fluid paint, it takes that. But it gives a very different finish, and it's really flat, the finish. Obviously, you don't get any of the texture from the canvas. And it looks a bit like a label when you take the masking tape, because I have to put masking tape on to hold the paper into position. And when you take that off around the sides, you see this line going around. It's almost like there's a label on the paper that you could peel off. And so it gives such a different effect. But I like that, just that smooth kind of no brush mark or palette knives mark. Look, it's just I find quite satisfying. But that's
so when you have been at an exhibition, when you've been exhibiting anywhere, have you ever thought, you know what, today I'm going to go in and I'm for an hour or whatever, I'm just going to do a small little painting so people can see how I work and what I create? Because I think people would find that really fascinating.
Well, I think it has its drawbacks because it's got to stay flat for so long to dry. And I have been asked to do workshops and things, and I think, you can't really take your work home with you straight away, and that's part of the
which would
storage and all that sort of thing. But yes, I mean, I'd be very, very happy to do a demonstration. I know that people do find that interesting, which is why I have my little YouTube channel with a few quick videos that just show my whole process.
Struggling with my webcam tonight. Keeps moving around and sliding down. And it's not like I'm sinking down into my chair. It's the camera's starting to fall behind the screen.
I thought it was going to be me with a technical problem.
No, unusual for that to happen, actually. But maybe it's coming up to Halloween. We've got a dodgy witch in the background. We've got now. This man has commented, and you're definitely going to know who it is because he was an absolute star at Flux. Paolo, he does watch different kind of flowers which work very well in those backgrounds. Well done, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Paolo.
He's a cracking. he's a cracking guy, and
Yes.
really interesting man. Actually, I absolutely loved the interview that I did with him. And anybody watching this hasn't seen it, jump back and have a look, because he's a filmmaker and he does all sorts. But he's an interesting guy. And again, I think one of the things that this show, if you like, does do is it does bring different artists who do completely different things. And you know, it's kind of why we come up with the idea of doing this, is to show that it's not just your typical art that everybody does. There's so much out there in the big wide world. You just got to go looking for it. And talking about looking for it, I'm just going to show now your website, because people can find you. It's sarahlevinarts.co.uk, and you can see here, because I'm on here, let's just hide that down the bottom so it gets a bit difference. And you do need to scroll down, because this gives you an idea. And here, over on this side here, I can see there's a little bit of art on, is that leather?
Yeah, it's on a leather key ring. Yeah.
Is that, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Now this
that was printed on it. It was printed on it from a painting. It wasn't actually painted.
Yeah, but that's a great idea. I'm all for that kind of thing. And also I'm all for people having their work turned into prints as well, because I'll come to that in a second, that next little bit, but purely because, you know, there are people who can't afford our art, and the most affordable way is to have your work available as limited edition prints, which means all right, people are not paying a huge amount of money for them, but they've got them on their wall and someone else sees it, and they are the sorts of people that could then come to you and buy an original. And talking of this
yes,
let's just scroll down to the Birkenstocks, which are here. I'm going to play this video quickly, because and it should hopefully work. So how cool is that? Well, they are. I mean, look, come on. I think anybody who's anybody, and I'm not one of them, but anybody who's anybody is wearing Birkenstocks. So what a great idea. How did that come about?
I just he did an open call. It's a Michael Gray sandal factory in America, and he customizes Birkenstocks with all sorts of people's artwork. He did an open call. I put my work forward thinking, you know, don't stand a hope in hell. And he messaged me and said, yeah, I think your work would look really great on them. And so, you know, we got together and we produced, you know, 2 different designs. So it was really lovely to do that, actually.
Well, yeah, but also what a great bit of PR as well. It's not just about that. It's what a brilliant idea. And he's absolutely right. Your work does lead absolutely to that. Now, do you go to the same supplier for your paints, or do you find that there are different companies that do different types, like your fluorescent paint, or you know, or do you stick to the same supplier?
That's a really good question. For the fluorescent paints, definitely it's always the same. Am I allowed to mention who? Yeah. I mean, I use golden paints because I think that their pigment quality is so good that it works well for me. So I use a lot of golden paint. I also use some Liquitex as well. I don't buy fluid paints per se. I always buy heavy body paints, which is like you squeeze them out like a toothpaste coming out.
Okay.
So they're really quite thick when you start off with them, and then they're mixed in with the Floetrol, which is the pouring medium, and a little bit of water. And I think because the quality of the pigments in golden paints is so good that they can take that and not lose the vibrancy.
So
Did
you have to experiment? First of all, I love it that you think this is the BBC, that we're not allowed to mention anybody.
You never know.
That's fantastic. But did you have to experiment for a good bit to get your consistency right?
Yes. And consistency is really key to everything, but a lot of different paints have different binders, different brands, and that can affect the consistency and the way they sort of work. The other thing that affects the paint is the density of the pigment, not how much pigment is in a paint, but the actual weight of that pigment that's used. And if they're heavy, they sink. And if they're lighter, they have a tendency to rise. So they don't always work with the colours that I put at the base of the flowers. So you have to, there's a fine balance. So some of the purpley colours are quite, not purple. No, dioxazine purple is brilliant to work with, but some of the other more mauvey colours don't work very well for some reason.
Okay.
So this is I show you this because you might find this interesting. So when I test my colours, I do my base colours, which you can see, and then I test the same colour on different bases. Now, some bases have got a fine edge to them, which is what I'm looking for because I want it to look like an outline on my flower. Others down here, the colour just sort of shrinks into the middle of the background. So there's a huge difference. So that is my main source of experimentation, is to find which ones work, to give me the outline that I want.
Right. So the outline is not a separate colour, it's part of the pour.
So the first colour that goes down, can you see the outline there?
Yeah.
That's the first colour I put down as a blob. Technical term that there. And then this one goes on top. The white one would go on top of that to fill it out. But it's got to stay like that. And some, as you can see, they sort of shrink from the edge. So these are different outlines. And that one, of course, just completely went to the centre. So it's a bit of hit and miss. But then you get to know which colours you can work with and which go well together. So
it's also really evident that you have to be quite careful about how much paint you put on, because you could end up losing that line.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's a bit scientific as well, really, isn't it? About the paint and that.
But it's so interesting as well. Now look, we've got a minute left.
No!
I told you. What did I say? You won't believe how quickly the hour goes, and it does. Now, so I'm going to throw a challenge at you. I'm going to throw a challenge at you to say, right, I'll give you till the next summer to actually try and have a go at something that's not botanical, and just see how you get on, because I'll be interested to know what your take would be on something different. And gives you plenty of time, and then I'll have you back on next year, and we'll have a little chat about it. I'm going to try and do a bit of a sort of a compilation thing where maybe I'll get a few different people on and we'll have a catch up, see how they've been getting on. So what's quickly before we stop, what's your next plan? What have you got? Exhibitions coming up? What's your next plan?
It's a bit quiet at the moment. I am with Bobcat Gallery in Putney at the moment, and I'm doing the Winter Boutique there in December. I've had some umbrellas printed, so they're going to be on sale there as well.
Interesting.
Lovely. Yeah, they're nice. And then after that, no, I haven't got anything planned. I'm looking forward to the next Flux, whenever that will be.
Yeah, it's such a Flux is just a fabulous event to do, and look, it's run by a great person and a great person who chooses great people to be a part of it, and that really is true.
I've met so many really lovely people at Flux, and as I said to you the other day, the beauty of it is that for the artist, you drop your work off and you come back and you enjoy the private view with everything hung and labelled, and it couldn't be any better, could it? I know
it couldn't be any better, but for the people, and I'm one of them, but I'm only a small part of it, but all the people that have to hang all that artwork, especially when all the artwork turns up different sizes to what we might have been told it is. Yeah, it's a bit stressful.
Yes.
I think my first Flux, I think I had a full head of hair, but no. Okay, right. Listen, Sarah, thank you very much for coming on. Don't go rushing away. Just stay on while I just tell people about next week's artist. But in the meantime, thank you very much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure. I can't believe how much I've learned and found out about how you work. It's been brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and thank you for persuading me. Because I wouldn't have done it otherwise.
Okay, I'll catch you in a bit. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
So there, I told you. I mean, wow, that's pretty amazing. I found that anyway. I had no idea that is how Sarah worked. Probably my fault for not actually asking at any exhibitions, but I hadn't had any idea at all how she does what she does. And I just jumped back. I did say I'd give you a bit of an idea of next week's artist. So Minnie is a photographic artist. It's something that she's been through uni learning from Sweden. Really, really different. I'm going to give you a bit of an idea now of what her work is like. And this shows you. Quite amazing, actually. Quite amazing what she does. And I really want to get into talking to her about her techniques, what her camera is, what does she do? Does she do this in Photoshop? All the different techniques she uses to create such an amazing piece of work. Now, having helped hang these at the last Flux, they are huge. So that's another thing I want to talk about is where she gets them printed, all that kind of stuff. And, that's art running her family. She was at Flux with her mother. Didn't get a chance to talk to her about whether she was artist or not, but this I'm going to just make this a little bit bigger so you can actually see a bit more what it's like. So thanks very much everybody for watching. It's been emotional. To coin a phrase. I think that all I'm going to do now is just say, look, thanks very much for watching, and I will see you next week. But next week we'll be back to Thursday, so this was only a special one-off. But next week, 7 o'clock, same place, same time, and well, thanks for watching, and happy Halloween.